Welcome to Mother's Revenge, where heartfelt stories touch your soul and may even bring you to tears. My father's voice split the air like breaking glass. You and your kid are dead-weight leeches sucking this family dry. My mother just smiled satisfied while they sat in the house I paid for eating dinner I cooked. For years I had been their safety net, their silent wallet, their backup plan. But that night, something inside me finally stopped bending. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I just looked my father in the eye and said, "You have 24 hours to leave." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. That was the night I realized blood can drown you faster than any stranger ever could. Before I share my story, I would love to know you are here with me and listening. Comment hi below or tell me where you are from. I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes knowing someone out there is listening makes all the difference. Thank you. And now let me tell you everything. My name is Ethan Cole, and what I am about to share is not just a story about betrayal. It is about breaking free from the people who taught me to stay silent. If you believe family should mean safety, not survival, please hit subscribe. Every story here is a voice reclaiming its worth, one truth at a time. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and roasted chicken, but the air was thick enough to choke on. The golden light above the table did not make it warmer. It only made every silence sharper. My parents sat across from me in the brownstone I had bought with my own money in the life I had built without their help, and yet they looked around as if they still owned it. I placed the last fork on the table, sliding a yellow sticky note beneath my plate. 4 rules were scribbled in black ink. No insults about Noah, no cash paperwork required. I can end the dinner at any time. Those were the boundaries they had taught me to never have. Gerald, my father, did not wait for the food to cool before his voice split through the air. You and that kid of yours are dead-weight leeches. Both of you sucking this family dry. My mother Margaret smiled the way she always did when she wanted to look innocent. Her approval small but deadly. My brother Travis leaned back in his chair, chewing slow like he was watching a play he had already seen the ending to. I stared at the roasted chicken between us and said evenly, "This dinner is not about blame. It is about seeing the paperwork. If you do not have it, we are done here." My father slammed his hand against the table, the plates rattling. "You make $420,000 a year, Ethan. How can you sit there and watch your family drown?" The number landed like a slap. I had not told them my salary. They had been tracking me somehow through Travis, probably. My mother jumped in with her softest tone, a tone that used to make me give in. "Sweetheart, we are family. Do not make your father upset. It is your duty to help." Duty. That word again. A word that sounded like love but meant debt. From the ceiling above, I heard the faint creak of floorboards. My son Noah, 12 years old, listening. I pictured him crouched beside his bed, clutching his sketchbook of rockets, hearing his grandfather call him a leech. My pulse steadied. "No one in this house," I said slowly, "will use my son as a tool to guilt me." Travis muttered, always so dramatic. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping the floor. I looked at each of them. The father who had never said he was proud. The mother who weaponized tears. The brother who called failure a vision. "You have 24 hours to leave my house." My voice was calm. No shouting, no begging, just final. For a second, no one breathed. My father's face turned the color of raw brick. My mother's smile flickered. Travis' smirk vanished. When I turned away, I caught my own reflection in the dark window shoulders, straight jaw tight, the same face that once flinched whenever he raised his voice. Not tonight. Upstairs, a door clicked shut. The sound anchored me. I had done what needed to be done. Later, after they had stormed out and the echo of the front door died, I stood alone in the kitchen. The sticky note under my plate glowed faintly from the light above. I peeled it up, folded it, and slipped it into my pocket. The clock ticked once, twice, then again. I whispered to no one. This time, I am not paying their price. The next evening, as the city started to blur into lights across the Brooklyn Bridge, my office at Soho was nearly empty. I was shutting my laptop when my phone buzzed. Margaret's name flashed across the screen. I almost let it ring out. Calls from my mother never came without cost. But something in me, that small part, still hoping she might just say hello, made me answer. Her voice trembled perfectly. "Ethan, your father's heart. They said we need to act fast," Margaret said, her voice trembling. I did not rush to believe her. I pressed my hand to the glass, looking out at Brooklyn. "Bring the hospital bills," I said quietly. I needed to see the paperwork before making any decision to make sure I was not being dragged into another performance. "And the house. It is bad, honey. We are $360,000 behind. The bank is threatening foreclosure." I pressed my palm to the cold glass window. Below, Brooklyn glowed like a promise I had built myself. "Bring the hospital bills," I said quietly. "The letters from the bank. Tomorrow night, dinner at my place." She hesitated, caught off guard. "Can't we just—" "No," I cut in, face to face. After I hung up, the silence in my office buzzed like static. I had been here before. Same words, different crisis. Somehow the emergencies never ended until I said yes. I walked to the cafe on Hudson Avenue where Daniel Brooks, my best friend from Columbia University, was waiting. He spun his coffee cup between his palms like a coin toss. "You should not have picked up," he said when I told him. "And if they do not show proof, that is not help they need. It is another performance." He leaned forward. "New York is a one-party consent state. Record the dinner. Keep everything. Build a file screenshots old transfers. Timestamps call it your case folder." I smiled without humor. "A file on my own family." Daniel's eyes softened. "You are not collecting dirt. You are collecting truth." By the time I left the cafe, the streetlights had come on. I stopped at an electronics store and bought a pocket recorder small enough to hide inside the lockbox above my kitchen counter. The clerk asked if it was for interviews. "Something like that," I said. When I got home, Noah was on the living room floor piecing together a model rocket. His fingers were smudged with paint. "Tomorrow is a grown-up night," I told him gently. "You will stay over at Nate's." "Okay." He did not look up. "Is Grandpa still mad?" I hesitated. "He just does not understand things the way we do." Noah nodded quietly. "Can I take my telescope?" "Of course." After he went upstairs, I stood by the fridge and pulled out a fresh sticky note. I wrote one line and pressed it to the door. "Do not bleed for people who get used to watching you bleed." The next morning on my way to work, I opened the mailbox by the stoop. Inside was an envelope from a mortgage company I did not recognize. "Refinance options for your property at 145 Elmwood Drive, White Plains." My parents' address. My stomach tightened. Maybe they really were drowning. Or maybe they had already dragged me into it without me knowing. That night, as I walked home through Park Slope, the neighborhood was quiet, the brownstones glowing soft and gold. My house stood still waiting. Inside the recorder sat, hidden in the lockbox, a silent witness for tomorrow. I looked up at Noah's window. His model rocket gleamed faintly under the lamp. For years I had told myself that helping my parents was the same as loving them. But love is not supposed to feel like drowning. Tomorrow I would find out if they ever planned to stop pulling me under. The table gleamed like an interrogation room oak polished to a mirror. Plates lined up with military precision. I had turned the overhead light cooler, not the warm gold of comfort, but the sharp white that makes people squint. The lockbox above the counter was already open just enough for the tiny red dot inside to blink. Recording. Margaret arrived first, smiling too sweetly, arms full of reheated casserole she had not cooked herself. "I thought I would bring something homey," she said, setting the dish down like peace offerings ever meant anything in this family. Gerald followed, grunting his usual hello that was not one. Travis came last, balancing his laptop. "I have got something to show you," he said. "AR meets VR. It is going to blow your mind. I did not sit yet. The documents, I said, bank letters, hospital forms, anything from the insurance company." Margaret's smile twitched. "Honey, you have to trust your mother. You think I would lie about your father's heart." She looked at Gerald, who thumped the table hard enough to rattle the glasses. "He is our son," he said. "He makes more in a year than we ever did in 10. Helping your family is your duty, Ethan." Travis clicked his laptop open, the screen glowing blue. "I am just saying if he backed me up this one time, I could pull us all out. It is about vision. You work in tech. You get it." I sat down slowly, voice even. No paperwork, no money. That is the rule. My mother's eyes narrowed, the warmth leaking out. "You are really going to let your father die over some papers? I am asking for honesty," I said. Gerald scoffed. "You have lost respect. You act like a stranger upstairs." Faint footsteps crossed the ceiling light, and uncertain. Noah was awake listening again. Travis leaned forward, words spilling faster than his brain could catch them. "Fine. The debt is mostly mine, okay? They co-signed for me. That is why the house is tied up." He froze halfway through the sentence, realizing what he had just done. The air went still. My mother's eyes cut toward him sharp and panicked. "Travis," she hissed. But it was too late. I leaned back, studying the three of them. "So it is not about heart surgery. It is about your company again." Margaret's voice dropped to a hiss. "Watch your tone. You think people will not believe us if we tell them how you have treated your family. I will post the truth online if I have to. Everyone will know what kind of ungrateful son you are. Maybe they will want to hear about that little boy you are raising all alone." For a moment I said nothing. The refrigerator hummed. The light flickered over the wine glass in her hand. I looked up to the ceiling again, silent above us. Noah deserved better than this echo of shame handed down like inheritance. I stood. "You have 24 hours to leave my house." Gerald's mouth opened, but no sound came. Margaret looked ready to cry, then decided not to waste the effort. Travis shut his laptop with a snap. I walked them to the door. No shouting, no explanations. When the latch clicked behind them, I exhaled the quiet roaring in my ears. I walked back to the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and switched off the recorder. The tiny red light disappeared. "Now," I said softly, "let the truth speak for itself." It started before sunrise. My phone would not stop vibrating on the nightstand notifications, hundreds of them. Margaret's face filled my feed, crying into her front camera under the caption, "Abandoned by our son." She sat in her rented penthouse, perfectly lit, holding a photo of my house behind her. Her voice shook in practiced rhythm. "He threw us out his own parents and his poor child. What kind of example is that?" The video had already hit 50,000 views when I reached the kitchen. By noon, it crossed 200,000. By evening, co-workers were whispering behind screens, pretending not to stare. Comments piled up like a storm surge. "Ungrateful. That boy deserves better. Rich people forget their roots." I scrolled until the words blurred. Somewhere between disgust and disbelief, I opened the case folder on my laptop. Subfolders blinked in neat rows. Social finance, legal, medical, cloud access. I started capturing everything. Screenshots, URLs, timestamps, metadata. I downloaded the video, backed it up on 2 external drives, uploaded a copy offline. If they wanted a war, I would fight it with evidence. Daniel met me that evening at our booth on Hudson Avenue. The calf lights were low, the smell of espresso cutting through my nausea. "They are escalating," he said, flipping open his tablet. I've already sent a preservation request to TikTok's legal department. You will want to track any cross-platform reposts before they delete or alter them. Too late for privacy, I said. She already mentioned Noah. Daniel frowned. Then you go full counterproof. Pull your transfer history. Show that every loan was your money, not theirs. Build your own narrative before they bury you in theirs. That night, I stayed at my desk long after the city went to sleep. I printed bank statements, highlighted the years I had covered their mortgage payments, utility bills, Travis, startup fees. A pattern emerged: monthly withdrawals labeled family expense that never returned. I saved every line. Around midnight, an anonymous email hit my inbox. No subject line, just an attachment, a scanned lease for a penthouse in the Upper West Side under my parents' names dated 2 weeks earlier. So much for being homeless. I stared at the signature, Gerald's bold, careless scrawl, and something in me hardened. Minutes later, I checked the video analytics again. One anonymous commenter had posted a long paragraph defending my mother. At the end, they cited my exact salary down to the decimal. Only 3 people on Earth knew that number: me, HR, and my father. I finally understood how they had always known too much. I switched to the cloud drive Travis had set up years ago for family photos. The folder still existed, syncing automatically with my phone. The same photo Margaret used in her video me and Noah in front of the brownstone was sitting there. Metadata showed it had been accessed 3 days ago from an IP address in White Plains. I stared at the timestamp until the edges of my vision blurred. They had not just twisted the story. They had reached inside my life and stolen the images that built it. The next morning, an email from Noah's teacher popped up. He has been quiet this week. Some of the kids saw things online. Just thought you should know. I sat there a long time before replying. Thank you. I will handle it. By afternoon, I had organized the entire digital record. Screenshots sorted by date, every transaction labeled, every comment logged. When Daniel dropped by to check in, I handed him a flash drive. Everything is on there, I said. Every lie they have, told, every post, every number. He nodded, sliding it into his briefcase. You have done the hard part now. Let the paper do the talking. After he left, I stood by the window watching Brooklyn fall into its usual rhythm of lights and noise. Noah came home later than usual, backpack slung low. Some kid said Grandma is famous now, he muttered. They asked if we really kicked her out. I crouched to meet his eyes. People online do not always tell the truth. What matters is what we know happened here. He looked unconvinced, but nodded. Upstairs, I heard him close his door, the quiet click, a sound I had grown to fear more than shouting. I turned back to my desk phone in hand and called a number I had not dialed before that night. It rang twice before a woman's calm voice answered. Caroline Reed. My name is Ethan Cole, I told her. If there is a legal way to close a door that has been left open too long, I want to know it. The line was silent for a moment. Then she replied, Then let us start building your case. I ended the call and looked at the city beyond the window, its reflection flickering across the glass. They wanted a public spectacle. I would give them something better, a paper trail they could not delete. Caroline Reed's office looked like it was carved out of ice and logic. The walls were glass, the floor polished gray, and the city below pulsed in reflections across her desk. Files were stacked like miniature skylines, paper towers built on people's mistakes. I slid my case folder across to her and watched her eyes move with surgical precision. She flipped through bank statements, mortgage contracts, refinance letters, until one page made her pause. Here, she said, tapping the corner with her pen. They refinanced in 2023. Clause 17. In the event of delinquency exceeding 90 days, the lender reserves the right to sell to any qualified buyer without prior consent. She looked up. If the account is in default, you can buy the house legally. For a moment, I could not speak. Not out of shock, but because the idea carried too much weight. That house was a scar stitched into my life. Birthdays turned silent. Dinners turned wars. My childhood turned into collateral. I did not want revenge. I wanted closure. Caroline leaned back, eyes steady. If you proceed, they cannot challenge you in court. The law is clean on this, but you will need to brace yourself publicly. This will look brutal. Buying your parents' home out from under them is not a headline people forgive easily. I stared at the contract, my father's and mother's signatures printed in neat cursive under the bank seal. They had not missed 1 or 2 payments. They had missed 3 months straight, 90 days delinquent. I was not watching them drown anymore. They had already let go of the rope. That night, rain slicked the Brooklyn Bridge. I parked on the shoulder for a moment, windshield wipers whispering over the glass radio, murmuring a talk show about family obligations. I thought of all the times those words had been used like chains. I called Daniel. "Can you check something for me?" "Always," he said. "I think they have been inside my cloud drive again." He did not even sound surprised. "Send me the log file." 20 minutes later, his voice came back over the speaker. "One of the logins came from White Plains 2 nights ago. IP traces to a local provider registered to your parents' address." My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. They are still in it after all this. "They are not just desperate," Daniel said quietly. "They are trying to keep control." The thought was colder than anger. Control. That was the real inheritance in my family. Guilt and control. By the time I got home, the city had gone to sleep, but I had not. I opened my laptop, signed into the bank's portal, and filled out the paperwork. My cursor hovered over the submit button. Buyer Ethan Cole. I clicked. A confirmation email came through seconds later. Application received. Short sale process initiated. Then another notification followed. Current co-owner on file, Travis Cole. They had already shifted part of the property under his name. A move to dodge the bank, maybe to stall the foreclosure. But the law had a word for people like me, bona fide purchaser, the good faith buyer protected. For once, I had the law on my side, not against me. I closed the laptop, the rain still whispering against the windows. I thought of Caroline's words. They will never expect you to fight clean. I was not fighting at all. I was simply signing the end of a cycle. I whispered to the dark kitchen. This is not revenge. This is repayment. The city outside hummed, unaware that a quiet battle line had just shifted. The war for truth was no longer about who shouted louder. It was about who held the receipts. I turned off the lights, feeling the calm that comes only after years of fear have finally expired. I am not punishing them, I said aloud, more to myself than to anyone. I am just closing a debt they never meant to pay. The house in White Plains stood at the end of a sagging street, the kind where the paint never quite dries and the air smells like wet plaster. The bank's notice hung crooked on the door, fluttering in the wind like a white flag. I held the keys Caroline had arranged through the foreclosure trustee and stepped inside with the locksmith. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and something older time itself, maybe. Every wall carried an echo. The hallway looked exactly as I remembered it, picture frames lined in perfect symmetry. Travis' graduation photo still hung in the center, his smile bright and fake. My own was there, too cropped from a group shot, my shoulder half cut off. Caroline stayed by the door phone in hand, double-checking our authorization. "You have got 2 hours," she said. "After that, I need to file our report." I nodded and headed upstairs. The steps creaked like they remembered every fight we had ever had. The attic door stuck for a moment before it gave way, sighing open. Boxes were stacked to the beams, each one labeled in Margaret's neat cursive, "Tax Receipts Misc," and one in fading ink, "Arthur L., my grandfather." I dragged it into the light. Inside were old bank envelopes, yellowed papers tied with string, and a letter folded carefully in plastic. I peeled it open. If you are reading this, Ethan, it means they have taken what was meant for you. The education fund is yours alone. No one else's dream, no one else's debt. Remember, money can be stolen, but integrity cannot. My throat tightened. I found the accompanying bank statements, withdrawals from my grandfather's trust matching the year I was supposed to start at Columbia University. Another envelope contained an IOU scrawled in Travis handwriting, borrowed from family fund for startup capital. Beneath it were my parents' signatures as guarantors. Every myth they had told about sacrifice and family was right there in ink, just not the version they had sold me. I sat on the attic floor, light cutting through the cracked window dust, swirling in thin beams. The anger did not come the way it used to. It did not burn. It settled cold, precise, and quiet. I pulled out my phone and began photographing everything: the letter, the IOU, the bank statements, the envelope seals. Each click of the camera sounded like the closing of a door. I texted the files to Caroline. She called within minutes. "This is it," she said. "This proves misuse of a restricted fund and direct misrepresentation. You do not need their word anymore. You have got documents." I ran a hand along the rough wood of the wall beside me. The grain splintered but strong. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice, slow and calm. "Do not take the anger with you. Take the truth." Downstairs, the locksmith called out, asking if I needed help hauling anything else. I told him no. I looked around one last time. The wallpaper peeled near the corner, revealing older layers beneath floral patterns from decades before. Generations of cover-ups, literal and otherwise. I found one more box by accident when I kicked over a broken stool. Inside were family photos: my parents at church events, Travis cutting a ribbon for some fake startup, Margaret smiling at some charity gala. And there, half hidden behind another frame, a picture of all four of us. Margaret had her arm around Travis. Gerald's hand rested on his shoulder. I was off to the side. Cropped, blurred, my face turned halfway out of the frame. I stared at it longer than I wanted to. That photo was the story of my life, always almost there, but never centered. When I stepped outside, the wind carried the scent of rain. Caroline was leaning against her car, reviewing something on her tablet. She looked up. "Find what you needed." More than that, I said. I found proof. We drove back toward the city in silence. The highway lights streaked across the windshield reflections, fading fast like ghosts in reverse. By the time I reached Park Slope, I felt lighter. Not vindicated, not victorious, just clean. The kind of clean that only truth can bring. I stored the scanned documents in the case drive, labeled the folder Arthur Evidence, and backed it up twice. Before bed, I stood at Noah's door. He was asleep, his telescope pointed out the window toward a sky he still believed could be trusted. I whispered, "We are safe now." Maybe I was saying it to him, maybe to myself. I sat by the window, watching the city breathe. For the first time in years, I did not feel hunted by the past. The truth was louder than any accusation, and I no longer needed to explain it. I looked at the faint glow of my grandfather's letter on the desk and murmured, "You were right. The walls remember, but they also release." And in that stillness, with the hum of the city below, I knew the war was shifting. It was not about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming what was stolen. The night did not feel heavy. It felt honest. I closed my eyes and let that be enough. The truth had finally spoken for me. Friday at Terminal 4 felt like a courtroom with rolling suitcases. Bright white lights, announcements slicing the air, strangers drifting into a loose half-circle without knowing why. Caroline stood beside me, folders tucked beneath her arm, the edges crisp as a verdict. Then I saw them, Travis first with his phone up, and that practiced half-smile, Margaret behind him hugging a travel pillow like a prop. Gerald last heavy steps and eyes that scanned the room for angles. Ethan. Margaret sang relief laid on thick. "I knew you would come. Blood is blood." I did not answer. Caroline stepped forward and placed 3 white envelopes into their hands. "You have been notified," she said. "Property transfer documents, a harassment restraining order, and formal notice from the lender." Travis tore his open, and the color left his face. "You bought our parents' house." I kept my voice low. "No, I bought back the future you mortgaged." Gerald's jaw flexed. "Do not humiliate your father in public." I pulled out my grandfather's letter and held it where they could all see the faded script. "He left these funds for my education. You used them to prop up a dream that never stood. Today they go back to what they were meant to protect." Margaret's eyes filled, then cleared as she adjusted to a different pose. "We just want to live, darling. You have become so cold." Around us, phones lifted, faces angled for sound. I met her gaze. "I am not cold. I learned how not to burn." Caroline handed documents to airport security. An officer skimmed them with professional boredom and nodded. "You will need to move along," he told my parents, then motioned to the side. Travis leaned close enough for me to see the sheen of sweat at his hairline. "You will regret this. No one wins against family." "I am not winning," I said. "I am just done losing." He flinched. Margaret's lips trembled, but no tears came. Gerald looked at the envelope like it might explode. As security guided them toward baggage claim, a stranger near the gate whispered, "What is happening?" Another answered, "Looks like the truth." When it was over, the crowd thinned as quickly as it had formed. I sat on a metal bench, the cold biting through my coat, adrenaline leaving a hollow behind my ribs. Caroline touched my shoulder once. "Paper speaks," she said. Then they walked away. For the first time in my life, I did not feel light. I felt empty. In that emptiness, something echoed space, and in it a kind of freedom. The brownstone felt unfamiliar in its quiet. No calls, no new videos. The absence of noise made me suspicious. 3 days later, Margaret posted again, but the performance had changed. No tears, no trembling hands, just an anxious smile and a careful confession that Travis had pushed her, that he had spun the story, that she had let herself be dragged along. Comments split at first, then tilted. People remembered too much from the last clip. Travis went live that night from a bare apartment, his voice echoing. He ranted about betrayal and manipulation, about how I had ruined his last chance. The viewer count shrank as he talked. Nothing sticks to a wall that refuses to hold it. I did not answer either of them online. I handed everything to Caroline, the letter, the IOU, the refinance clause, the bank statements, and let her file the story where it could not be deleted. In a small courtroom in Manhattan, the judge flipped through our exhibits and glanced at me. "You are not seeking monetary damages. I am asking for the record," I said. "I need the truth to live somewhere official." He signed. Done. The deed listed my name alone. Outside, the winter light felt thin and honest. That evening, I went back to White Plains with a cleanup crew. The house was stripped to its bones, dust, loose wire, the hollow of old furniture. In a corner of the garage, behind a stack of warped paneling, I found a wooden sign from another era coal carpentry. Family since 1976. I brushed off the grime and carried it to the curb, then stopped. I decided to keep it not as a memorial, but as a warning: if the foundation is a lie, nothing you build lasts. Margaret posted once more before disappearing, blaming Travis in a tone that sounded like a door closing. In Discovery, Caroline pulled a thread of messages where Travis had mapped out the first viral post angles, captions, which photo to pluck from the family cloud. We entered them into the file. Gerald never showed for court. His lawyer said he was unreachable, which felt like the truest thing anyone in his camp had ever said. Back home, the kitchen clock ticked like it did the night I placed the sticky note under my plate. I thought victory would feel louder. Instead, it sounded like a long exhale I had not realized I had been holding. I set the old carpentry sign against the wall and let the silence settle. Justice had not made me happy. It had made me honest. and sometimes that is all you can ask for. The morning broke clear and soft over Park Slope. Daniel stopped by with coffee. Caroline arrived with a slim stack of final papers. We signed where the tabs told me to sign. When she packed her briefcase, Caroline smiled, almost surprised. "You won without needing anyone else to lose." "I was not trying to win," I said. "I was trying to live." In the afternoon, Melissa Grant from the New York Tribune sat on my porch with a small recorder. "Are you afraid to tell this publicly?" she asked. "Not anymore," I said. "I let too many people tell it for me." Her article went live a week later. My inbox filled with messages from strangers who had been called selfish for saying no, who had been turned into wallets with a heartbeat, who had been shamed for drawing a line and told it was not love. I read them at the kitchen table, each one a small lantern. I started sketching a plan for a support group, a quiet room once a month where people could name what happened to them and not be told to forgive it before they understood it. Maybe a small channel to share resources about boundaries and documentation, about how to keep your life yours without having to explain why. Late that day, Noah called me into the yard. He stood by a shallow hole with a sapling in his arms. "Can we put it here?" he asked, "so I can see it from my window." We lowered the red maple into the earth-pressed soil around its young trunk and watered until the ground darkened. I told him about his great-great-grandfather planting a peony tree in New Hampshire, how it took years before it offered shade. "Trees and trust need time," I said. He looked up. "When I am older, I want to see this from the street and know it is ours." "One day you will leave this house," I told him. "When you do, the tree will still be here to remind you freedom is something you keep." That evening, I found a new drawing on his desk, a red rocket lifting through a canopy of maple leaves. I rested my hand on the page. "You have got your own sky now," I whispered. An email pinged after midnight from Gerald. 5 words. I read it. "Maybe you are not wrong. No apology, no warmth, just a dent in the armor where certainty used to live." Another notice came through Caroline the next morning. The bank had initiated a separate review tied to Travis transfers, a process triggered automatically by our short sale record. I had not called anyone. Sometimes systems do what people will not. By the end of the week, Margaret's account vanished from the platform for violating harassment rules. The noise faded. The house felt like itself again. I stood at the back door and watched sunlight catch on the new leaves. People say blood is everything. I have learned something else. Boundaries are what make a family possible. When my son grows up, I want him to know that loving someone matters less than not losing yourself to prove it. The maple will take years to fill with color. That is fine. We are not in a hurry anymore. Every story like mine begins in silence, where love gets confused with debt and loyalty feels like a lifelong sentence. But when the truth finally speaks, it does not roar. It whispers steady and clear. You are allowed to protect yourself. If my journey has shown me anything, it is that freedom is not found in revenge. It is found in boundaries. I did not fight my family to win. I fought to breathe, to build a home where my son can grow without fear of owing love to anyone. Maybe you have been there too, questioning if walking away makes you heartless. It does not. It makes you whole. So if you have ever been told your pain is disrespect or your no makes you selfish, know this: you are not alone. Before you go, drop a simple "I hear you" in the comments or tell me where you are watching from. Let us remind each other that healing is not isolation, it is community. Thank you for listening. And if my story reached you, stay subscribed and keep standing for your truth.